I scored a 99 percentile score on the GMAT with 6 weeks of preparation. That was many years back. The GMAT exam format and scoring methodology have changed significantly starting 2024, and I'm trying to score a 99 percentile score on the GMAT once again. The question is, can I achieve my goal with confidence and certainty and without relying on luck given all the challenges that lie on the way? Today is day 30 of my GMAT prep, and I have been capturing every single minute of my GMAT prep on video. Through this series of videos, I intend to demonstrate rather than just describe the GMAT prep advice that I'm willing to bet my GMAT score on. For today, my focus is to start my preparation for the verbal section of the GMAT. Over the past few weeks, I have finished my preparation for the quant section and made significant progress on my preparation for the data insight section. One question that I'd like to address upfront is why I'm making a shift to preparing for the verbal section when my preparation for the data insight section is not complete yet. I'd like to answer that in two parts. If you have been following me, you know that my struggles on the data insight section are limited to two specific issues. First, I need to improve my problem-solving velocity on the data insight section so that I am able to consistently solve 20 questions within the allocated 45 minutes. Second, the data insights questions on which I struggle the most have their roots in the verbal section of the GMAT. As an example, in one of my previous videos, I had specifically called out having trouble with one or two two-part analysis questions, which was modeled as two related critical reasoning questions posed at the same time as a single question. This problem is not surprising because I have not invested time into preparing for the verbal section of the GMAT yet. By shifting my attention more heavily to the verbal section, I plan to address this second issue that has been troubling me on the data insight section as well. While I'm preparing for the verbal section, I will simultaneously spend time on practicing questions from the quant and data insight section of the GMAT. My practice on those sections will be more targeted with the objective of retaining the muscle memories which I'm going to need in order to perform effectively on those two sections of the GMAT Focus Edition. Before I get to my practice set for the day, there are two other decisions about my GMAT preparation that I'd like to share. Going forward, I will only be using the online question bank for all my practice sets. If you have been following my GMAT preparation journey, you know that there was a time when I decided to use the physical official guide instead of the online question bank to facilitate my GMAT preparation. That decision was informed by the fact that I couldn't find a way to use the online question bank in a manner that was consistent with my approach to GMAT preparation. Fortunately, I was forced to use the online question bank as I was preparing for the data insight section, and as a result, I was able to figure out a way on how I could use it in a manner that makes my GMAT preparation approach more effective. At some point of time in the future, I will make a dedicated video with my recommendations on how I think you should use the online question bank to make your GMAT preparation more effective. I will link that video somewhere up here whenever it is available for public viewing. The second thing I wanted to call out is that as I prepare for the verbal section, you will see me use my scratch pad less. That is simply because verbal questions on the GMAT inherently require more mental processing versus writing things down on paper. So I plan to use my whiteboard and my dry erase markers through all my verbal practice sessions. That will also help me get used to this scratchwork setup, which I know I will have to use on the final GMAT as well, given that I plan to take the test online. With that said, time for me to jump into my first verbal practice session. Alright, so that was 1.5 hours in total. 50 minutes of that were spent on a verbal practice set, followed by checking answers and conducting a deeper performance analysis. I answered 23 questions in total, all of which were reading comprehension questions. I was able to answer 22 of them correctly. I answered one question wrong, in particular question number 18 from the practice set. The problem with this one, as you can roughly see from my notes here, is that I couldn't decide which one of two options was the right answer. On deeper analysis though, I found that option A, which I ended up going with the right answer, was not even close to being correct. Let me talk about what happened. This was a paragraph relating to the topic of botanical sciences. It described various species of a plant and how specific species differ from all the other species in terms of how they have evolved. As per the paragraph, one of the characteristics that differentiates the two groups is their behavior related to another object in nature. I will not name that object because I do not want to spoil the question for you. The relationship between the groups of species and the natural object I'm referring to was described using a word that looked like so. So you have AAA followed by Y, where AAA represents the natural object I'm talking about. Under option A, GMAT in its classic style replaced Y with Z. Now, one of the strategies that I use on reading comprehension questions is to retain key parts of words instead of entire words. So when I see something like AAA followed by Y, I might end up retaining only AAA for the sake of efficiency. That is exactly what I did in this case. Because of that strategy, when I read the answer options, I was super confident that the word AAA, Z was actually mentioned in the passage as is. You might think that this is a problem of the strategy, but from my perspective, it is is a problem with how I applied it. The lesson from this is for me to be a little bit more self-aware of my internal processing when I am using this strategy. If I had been sufficiently self-aware at the time of reading the answer options that what I remembered confidently from the passage was only the first part of the word and not the entire word, I would have spent a few extra seconds or a minute to go back and read the passage once again. If I had done that, I would have ended up answering this question correctly. Going beyond that question, there are a couple quick principles that I want to talk about which build on top of each other and which will help you on reading comprehension questions. The first one is collapse and substitute words. Let's say you are given a reading comprehension question that has something to do with nocturnally migrating birds. The paragraph describes 2 pieces of research on that topic and shares some line of reasoning to make certain conclusions about nocturnally migrating birds. The problem is that even as you are reading the passage, you run into the phrase nocturnally migrating birds repeatedly. The first thing you should notice is that it is a mouthful to say. The second thing to notice is that every time you read a sentence containing that phrase, you will find yourself speaking those words in your head. In doing so, you will not only waste valuable time, but also run out of mental energy and bandwidth to process the passage properly. One of the things you can do to speed things up and reduce the friction involved in reading a passage like that is to simply collapse or substitute those words. For example, instead of saying nocturnally migrating birds every single time you encounter that phrase, you could simply shorten that to NMB. That will lower your cognitive load and make it easier to read the rest of the passage. The second principle, which builds on top of that idea, is to cut syllables. This works in multiple ways, but I will explain it simply by just relying on the example I was using. So let's say you shorten nocturnally migrating birds to NMB. Now, in your mental processing, you're going to say NMB every time you come across that phrase. Clearly, that is more efficient than saying nocturnally migrating birds every single time. But there is opportunity to boost your mental processing efficiency even further. Instead of saying NMB in your head, you can replace NMB, which consists of 3 syllables, with something like numb, which consists of only 1 syllable. The benefit is that by applying these 2 layers of simplification on the language, you will increase the speed with which you are processing what you are reading and free up mental bandwidth so you can focus on understanding the line of reasoning that the passage uses. The last point I will use here is that the final form that the phrase takes, in our case numb, does not have to do anything to do with the initial form of the phrase, which in our case was nocturnally migrating birds. Chances are you are going to read this paragraph only once in your entire lifetime. So you need to remember that numb represents nocturnally migrating birds only for the 5 minutes or so that you are answering that particular reading comprehension question. Alright, so that brings today's video to a close. If you have any questions for me, click on the Ask Me Anything link in the video description below. Hit like, subscribe and bell before you go, and put something in the comments such as a link to your favorite video of a dog receiving spa therapy. I prefer watching dogs in the spa instead of going to the spa. I will see you in the next video.